A lot of the objects and buildings created by our ancient ancestors are a total mystery to us. Not only is it the case that experts sometimes can't tell us what these ancient creations were used for, but sometimes they can't even tell us how they were made. We love a good mystery on this channel though, so we're excited to bring you the stories of these baffling artifacts. You might be familiar with the theory of the African diaspora, which is the idea that all human life began in Africa and made its way out across the world from there. It's believed by many scientists and experts, but a discovery made in Israel in January 2018 might challenge that concept. It's a small fragment of what's believed to be a Homo sapien jawbone, complete with teeth, and if it's confirmed as being what it appears to be, it will prove that Homo sapiens were in Israel almost 100,000 years before the time it's thought that they left Africa. Staggeringly, this jawbone is around 190,000 years old, and it challenges everything we think we know about human migration and possibly even human evolution. The bone comes from the Mislia Cave, which is part of Israel's Mount Carmel range of mountains. The area has long been known to contain the remains of prehistoric human settlements, but nothing quite so ancient as this has ever turned up there before. Even if it isn't human, it might belong to a previously unknown species that exchanged genes with ancient hominins or Neanderthals in the area. In other words, it's hugely significant. What can we learn about Native American people from their tobacco pipes? Quite a lot, as it turns out. In June 2021, archaeologists and historians completed a study of Native American pipes taken from former Hopewell sites in Ohio and Illinois. The purpose of the study was to demonstrate that greater differences existed between Hopewell-era tribes than historians generally recognize, and the academics succeeded. In the past, it was thought that the pipes were made the same way, because they were made from the same material. The new study has proven that while the Illinois pipes were made locally, the Ohio pipes were made using stone quarried from Illinois. The pipes weren't made in Ohio. They were obtained from Ohio-based tribes via trade. There are also key differences on how they were disposed of. The Hopewell-era tribes of Ohio broke their pipes and buried them together in some kind of communal rite. But in Illinois, they were left in one piece and buried with their owners. While it's tempting to think that Native American peoples shared a broadly similar culture and lifestyle over 2,000 years ago, this pipe study proves that they were diverse and different. The type of shoe often described as a Winklepicker has a bad reputation. They're often described as shoes that are unfit for almost any purpose, but during medieval times, they were even worse. According to a study that was published in June 2021, pointy shoes like the ones we see here were responsible for a painful outbreak of bunions in medieval Britain. That must have been an occupational hazard for court jesters. To reach their conclusion, academics studied the foot bones of more than 200 medieval skeletons buried in the cemeteries of Cambridge, England. They recorded a higher than expected number of foot deformities, and they think bad footwear was to blame. Winklepickers were known as poulains during the 14th century, and were very much the fashion of the time. As many as a quarter of the 14th and 15th century skeletons they studied had deformities, compared to only 5% of those buried in the 12th and 13th centuries. Medieval Winklepickers were even longer and thinner than those worn today, so it's no wonder they caused problems. It seems strange that people would put themselves through such discomfort for the sake of fashion, but then again, people still do it today. Mexico is always a fantastic place to look for archaeological artifacts, and our next set of discoveries is no exception to that rule. In the Mexican state of Jalisco, you'll find the El Toro Hills, and among those hills are countless ancient burial sites. Archaeologists have been exploring those burial sites for more than 80 years, and some of the things they've found there are nothing short of remarkable. The origin of the majority of the artifacts is considered unexplained. They're mostly made from ornamental stones like jasper, jade, and lapis lazuli, and take the form of plates, slabs, smoking pipes, masks, and alien-like figurines. In fact, alien and spaceship-like images and motifs appear on almost all of the El Toro artifacts. In many cases, the images are accompanied by symbols and what appears to be writing, but neither the symbols nor the writing can be translated. Scientists prefer to dismiss the El Toro artifacts as hoaxes, and that's probably true of some of them, but not all of them. There's clearly something very strange about the burials that took place in these hills many centuries ago, and we have no idea what the objects represent. If you work in an office, you might have a curse jar into which people put coins if they're caught using bad language. Here's a 2,300-year-old curse jar from Athens, Greece, one that worked in a very different way from the one in your office. The jar contains the carefully dismembered bones of a chicken and is covered with scrawled inscriptions all over its exterior surface. When translated, the text contains a curse intended to either paralyze or kill no fewer than 55 residents of Athens. Curse tablets are nothing new in Athens. They're found as thin sheets of lead buried underground quite regularly. But curse jars are much rarer. After writing his curse, the unknown owner of this jar then buried it with a large iron nail driven through it, as a way of sealing the curse. Strange as it might seem, archaeologists believe that the curse was most likely written by the defendant in an impending court case. Trials were everyday events in ancient Athens, so a defendant might have wanted to curse the plaintiff, their witnesses, their families, and anyone else they're close to if they believed they'd gain an advantage from doing so. Metalwork appears to have been a specialty in the Polish village of Poniaty during the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. More than 200 metal artifacts have been discovered in the region by archaeologists, ranging from religious sculptures to spurs and pieces of jewelry. Of that whole collection, though, it's the two metal faces that provoke the most interest. One of them, made of lead, shows a smiling human face with its eyes closed, perhaps sleeping peacefully. It was most likely a seal of some kind. The other face, with its shocked expression that's been compared to the famous poster from the movie Home Alone, is made from copper alloy. It's believed that this might have been a belt buckle because of the mounting holes in the face's ears. Nothing similar to this has ever been found in Poland before or since, although they bear some similarity to other ornamental metal faces found on the borderlands of Eurasia. The artifacts were found in 2019 during the construction of new gas reservoirs, which has revealed the presence of a settlement that dates back to the Middle Ages. Further archaeological work is now scheduled, so perhaps more faces will be found. During the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries, the height of fashion for women in Scandinavia was to wear a disc-on-bow brooch. These beautiful pieces of jewelry were intricately gilded and showcased hand-picked red garnet gemstones from far-flung places like India and Sri Lanka. We know that the brooches were exclusively worn by women because they've only ever been found in women's graves. There might have been more to wearing these accessories than simply wanting to look good, though. There are signs that some of them were worn continuously for more than a century, suggesting that they were passed down through the generations from one woman to the next. Some experts have hypothesized that the complex patterns and images etched into the brooches might even contain coded information about the family history of the brooch's owner. Some of the disc-on-bow brooches even contain depictions of women wearing disc-on-bow brooches, almost like a jewelry-based version of the film Inception. If there is information encoded within the artifacts, historians have not yet been able to crack the code. Still, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Turkeys were a precious resource for the Pueblo Indians. They could be used for food, or their feathers could be used to make clothing and blankets. Surprisingly, though, it seems that each bird was used for one purpose or another, rather than both. We can see evidence of this in this recently discovered 800-year-old Pueblo Indian blanket, which is made of just over 11,500 turkey feathers. Scientists have been able to determine that the many turkeys who contributed to the blanket were still alive when their feathers were plucked. Excavations at the site of the discovery have identified mass turkey burials, but the turkeys seem to have died of natural causes. The current working theory is that they were kept alive to grow feathers and then have them plucked repeatedly during their lifetimes. The mass burials were probably a ritual of some kind, albeit one we can't pretend to understand. The idea of eating turkeys didn't really catch on until the 12th century, so although this blanket comes from around that time, it might predate the first time someone looked at the birds and wondered what they tasted like. We're going to November 2020 for our next discovery, which happened at the site of an ancient necropolis in Autun, France. It's this beautiful Roman-era diatretic glass vase, made from reticulated glass. The Romans were exceptionally gifted at making glass artifacts, with skills that were light years ahead of every other civilization of their era. When it was found, the vase was smashed into hundreds of pieces, but experts spent a full year putting the pieces back together and were delighted to find that they had the whole vase. The cemetery was in use between the 3rd and 5th centuries, and the vase was found at the feet of an unknown individual who probably died during the 4th century. Only 10 Roman reticulated glass artifacts have ever been found. Of those 10, this is the only one to turn up in France, or Gaul as the Romans knew it. The quality of the restoration and repair work is so good that we can now read the vase's original inscription. It says, "Vivus Feliciter." It translates as "live in happiness." If you thought the cliched motto "live, laugh, love" was a plague of the modern age, think again. We've already known for a long time that some of the world's most ancient and incredible cave art could be found inside the caves of Sulawesi in Indonesia. But in January 2021, we found out that the caves were home to the oldest animal painting in the world. It's a painting of a wild pig, created using red ochre, and it's about 45,500 years old. The painting is realistic and life-sized, and seems to be part of a larger narrative scene painted on the walls of a cave called Liang Tidongne. Aside from being the world's oldest animal painting, this is the oldest evidence of human settlement in the region. Dating the painting was possible thanks to the presence of a calcite deposit that had formed on top of it, which was suitable for the uranium series isotope. The test results confirmed that the deposit was 45,500 years old, but it's possible that the painting could be even older. 2 human handprints are visible above the pig's rear end, which might have been left behind by the artist or artists as a way of signing their work. There were 2 more pigs facing this one on the wall, but sadly they haven't survived the passage of time. We're back to the topic of Roman discoveries now. Here's a Roman bath from the 4th century, which has recently emerged from the sand dunes of Cadiz, Spain. The baths are partially ruined, but the fact that there's anything left of them at all is almost miraculous. Cadiz was founded by the Phoenicians more than 3,000 years ago, so the city was already ancient by the time the Romans arrived. It was then razed and smashed to the ground by the Visigoths as they conquered the south of Spain in the year 410. Much of what the Romans built was deliberately targeted, but the baths were spared. They couldn't have been open for very long before the Visigoths arrived. It's likely that they've survived for this long because it was buried by wind-whipped sand shortly after they were abandoned. While the damage done to the building in the past is extensive, there are still traces of the black, red, and white stucco that once decorated the walls. Even the marble cladding is still present in some areas. Rather than being built for a royal or a wealthy individual, the baths probably served as a communal space for the workers from the nearby fish farming and salting plants. During the Iron Age, about 2,500 years ago, somebody took apart the pieces of a horse harness, wrapped the pieces in leaves, and then placed them inside a leather bag and buried them in Torun, Poland. In October 2020, the bag and its contents were finally rediscovered by archaeologists. Aside from turning green, the elaborately decorated pieces of bronze have survived the passing of the centuries unharmed. The bridle was broken up into 150 separate pieces before it was buried. Archaeologists and historians are at a loss to explain why this was done. If the intention was to come back for the bridal, why break it up when it could have been buried whole? Even if there was never any intention to come back for it, breaking it apart and wrapping it in leaves must surely have been a deliberate attempt to preserve and protect it. We'll never know the answers to these questions. The harness is of a kind known to have been used by nomadic Scythians, who only usually buried things if they were making a tomb. One possible explanation is that the raw materials of the harness had value as metals that could be melted down and used for something else, but that still doesn't explain why they were buried and then left behind.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!